For essentially the last 20 to 25 years, I've specialized in using motion capture and other biomechanics technologies to assess and evaluate foundational movement patterns for all kinds of sports, but golf is a big one for us. And then to prescribe training programs that include movement exercises as well as traditional strength exercises to improve foundational pattern and improve overall golf swing performance. So I'll start today by saying that in the past, and not that long ago, I think that golf coaches and trainers, and even your medical professionals, your physical therapists, your physios, kind of saw strength training as a separate vehicle from coaching and swing training. More and more today, we see that they are actually very much intertwined. And the reason they are very intertwined is because if we look at strength exercises as something more than just producing force against resistance or producing a rate of force development and soft tissue and some neurological response, if we look at it more as complex patterning disguised as resistance training, we can get the benefit of becoming stronger, more powerful, faster, while at the same time improving, in some cases creating from scratch, and certainly enhancing basic fundamental patterns that are very important for golf swing performance. So today I'm just going to talk about two very basic exercises and how they relate to the golf swing, and how you do the exercise is so much more important in many cases than what the exercise is. What the exercise, there's many variations, there's all kinds of great exercises. If you don't understand why you're doing it and you don't do it correctly, you'll get very little out of it, especially towards your end goal, which in this case will be golf swing performance. So let's talk about a really basic movement, a squat. Okay, there's many variations of body weight squat and weighted squat that we can talk about, but let's just talk about a basic body weight squat, and let's talk about how it relates to the golf swing. Okay, in the golf swing, it's very important that we are able to maintain an orientation with our torso in space, creating the ability to rotate in a controlled way and in a controlled environment, right? So we need to be able to stabilize. People who can't stabilize real well have swing playing problems and ball striking problems and power generation problems. So the key is that foundational pattern to golf swing performance is the ability to maintain stability while moving dynamically, especially with the lower body. Okay? So a squat is essentially this. A squat is our ability to maintain posture while moving our lower extremity, right? And a big part of that is what I'll call hip articulation or hip dissociation, where we need to be able to dissociate hip movement from pelvic and low back movement. All right, so there's different forms of that, but this is an easy way to start to create hip articulation while at the same time you're gaining strength. I like to start people with a box squat because, believe it or not, a lot of people just don't know how to squat. Okay, so what we do with a box squat, I'm going to use a bench. We're going to get ourselves in a slightly wider than shoulder width position, and our feet are just slightly turned out. So it's a natural, comfortable position, and all the joints are essentially lined up. Okay? Now what I'm going to do is I typically have the athlete hold their arms straight out. Now this is a gauge. If you start to do this, or you start to do this, or you start to do this kind of stuff, you can see that, right? We want to keep our arms level. If we keep our arms level, that means we're maintaining stability with our core while we're articulating the hip. And we're creating mobility, not just in the hip joint, but a dissociation between the hip, the pelvis, and the low spine, okay? So what we do is a very basic sit back to the box, sit on the box, put your weight on the box, drive up through the heels, and engage, okay? Seems like a very simple movement, but you'll see that a lot of people, even fairly high-level athletes, have trouble with just the basic movement. So again, we are stabilizing our core, articulating the lower half of our body. Boom. Okay, if you watch from the side, you'll see I'm basically in this position, sitting down, and then coming up, right? So it's a very, very simple exercise. Once you get good at a basic box squat, you can then add weight. You can add kettlebells, you can add dumbbells, you can add a barbell, you can add bands, you can use machines. There's lots of variations, and you can make a squat a dynamic effort as well. You can do variations of lunges and single leg stuff. So there's a lot of things that the basic squat can do, and as you're doing that, you're learning how to stabilize your core while you're articulating your lower half. Okay, and that's very, very important to the golf swing. So you're building strength and you're rehearsing and enhancing patterns that are critical to a good golf swing. Okay, that's the first exercise. The second exercise I wanted to bring up is a kettlebell swing. Okay, now if you think about in the golf swing, a very important aspect of fundamental movement is big muscles, or what we call the proximal side of the equation, doing work to then accelerate the distal. Okay, so if you think of a crack of a bullwhip, yes, all the speed occurs at the tip of the whip. That's where that sonic boom is. That's where that crack is, right? It's all up there. But the tip does very little to produce that speed. It receives and benefits, okay, but it doesn't produce. What happens? Where does that come from? It comes from the handle of the whip. If I create a good motion here, then that speed translates out to the distal end. The distal end, or the end of the linkage, the end of the system, is doing very little actual work. It's there to relay and transmit more than anything. Okay, so, and that's very true in the golf swing. The legs and the torso are creating the drive for speed. The arms and the club deliver the speed. All right. So there's a lot of exercises. And this is universal. It's not just golf. There are a lot of exercises that we can use to enhance the lower body core drive mechanism and relax the upper body receiving mechanism. Okay, there's lots of them, but I like kettlebell swings. Okay, now you can do a two-hand hip hinge swing. And the key is I'm not lifting the weight, I'm snapping the weight with and the arms really aren't doing anything. In fact, you can even let go of the weight, as long as you're holding that at the bottom, you can almost let go of the weight at the top. So a basic hinge swing would just be a snap, boom. See? I'm not even touching the weight at the top. So I'm not lifting at all, okay? So that's a basic hinge, and that's one way you can teach people. And I've got lots of variations I use to help people learn how to swing, and not just rigidly kind of try to lift the weight with their arms and their shoulders, okay? If you want to get a little bit more golf swing specific, we can add a single arm variation, which will actually create rotation, right? So if I use a single arm, you can see my upper body, my lower body's fairly square, a little bit of turn. My upper body has more turn, okay? And as I come out, my hips are going to straighten, my shoulders are going to straighten, and my arms coming across my midline. So I've created, even though it's small, I've created a dynamic rotational pattern, while again, I am enhancing that foundational proximal distal pattern. So let's see how that looks. A basic alternating one. So what's nice to do alternating is you can just do one arm, or you can get to the top and you can work both sides. Okay? So let's do an alternating version. Let's go up to the top and then back. Right? So you can see there's that rotational component. You can even do some variations called high pulls. From there, single arm high pulls would just be add a little bit more explosive pattern like that. But what it is primarily proximal to distal. You can get a good cardio workout from it. You can get strength, glute posterior chain, a lot of glute posterior chain in it. And you're also practicing stability, core strength, and hip lower body articulation with a little bit more of a hinge than a squat, but it's the same idea. So basic exercises can not only produce force against resistance, doing it quickly can produce power and speed, okay? But we can also create, perfect, enhance, and drive home the message of fundamental golf swing patterns, or really rotational swing and throw patterns. So the new version of weight training is essentially neuromechanical pattern building against resistance. And if you think of that way, boy, it opens up a whole new world of how I can use an exercise. Basic exercises. I won't get into it in this little short segment, but there's stuff that people would say, oh, there's no way that can affect or have a real impact on, say, for example, a rotational pattern like golf, because it's very planar. But yet when you break it down to its core fundamental patterns, it can be very effective for building strength, but also building pattern and honing that pattern into the golf swing. So really, strength training, and in all its functional forms and variations, is something that can be very married to golf instruction and swing instruction and coaching. And more in this day and age, that's happening, and it's a pretty exciting thing.